Well, welcome everybody.
Can we see how many people? There's usually something. Participants 8.
I know we've got quite a few other people who will be joining us this evening, but it is 5:30, so I do want to get us started so we have plenty of time tonight. Welcome everyone to our virtual gallery talk on African American prints from the Jim and Martha Sweeny collection here at the Lipa Ratner Museum of Art. My name is Teresa Wilkins. I am the director of the museum here. And tonight we are so excited to present to you this incredible program. Here at the museum, I am joined by our curator, Christine Renc-Carter, as well as artist and printmaker, Marjorie Greene-Graff. Marjorie and Christine, thank you for joining us this evening. And also tuning in this evening, our special guest is artist, educator, master printmaker, and of course, founder of the Brandywine Print Workshop, Mr. Allan Edmonds. Allan, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Well, thank you for having me, inviting me. It's a pleasure to participate in this. I always love any opportunity to sing the praises of the legacy that is Brandywine Workshop. So thank you all, and thank you, Christine and Marjorie, for bringing me to the attention of the museum and Brandywine to the attention of the museum. So,
well, I am going to be our sort of host and Zoom moderator for the evening. So we do ask that as we move through the presentation, all of our attendees can keep their microphones muted, and we will have time for questions and answers at the end. If you think of questions while we're going through our discussion, please go ahead and utilize the chat feature of our Zoom meeting and put any questions you have into the chat so we can make sure we address all questions at the end. And so without further ado, I am going to pass over control and presentation to our curator, Christine. Christine, it's all yours.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And again, thank you to Allan Edmonds for joining in from Philadelphia. And thank you to Marjorie here. I hope that you cannot hear the monsoon that has just started outside of the museum. So hopefully we've put our speakers up as loud as we can so that we can share in the conversation. But I wanted to put this conversation into context first and give you a sense of the African American prints exhibition from the Jim and Martha Sweeny collection, because Allan Edmonds, who is the founder of Brandywine, there are 7 prints in this exhibition that came from Brandywine and are part of the oversight from Allan. So let me, we have a slideshow that Teresa is running of the exhibition while I just give you a little overview. African American Prints from the Jim and Martha Sweeny collection celebrates Lipa Ratner Museum of Art's newest acquisition of 22 prints by some of the most influential artists of our time, including Romare Bearden, Elizabeth Catlett, Howardina Pindell, and many others. They bring the Black experience to the forefront through vibrant works inspired by jazz music, quilting traditions, and the African diaspora. As artists, educators, and innovators, many found their creative voice in the face of adversity and challenged systemic inequality by establishing their own rules. While exploring identity and embracing traditions in printmaking, they each have played an important role in elevating the Black voice in contemporary American art. This exhibition highlights influential printmakers from the Harlem Renaissance to today. Artists like Romare Bearden and James L. Wells, who you see here, set the tone for representing the Black experience in American culture in the 20s and the 30s. As a professor at Howard University, James Wells championed printmaking and mentored many young Black artists, including Elizabeth Catlett, one of my personal favorite printmakers. The Great Depression led to the Work Progress Administration Federal Art Project. The WPA employed artists and established print workshops in communities across the country. This led to a burgeoning scene of Black artists who continued to explore traditions of printmaking and cultural identity as a means of self-expression from the mid-20th century to today. In the 1960s and 70s, underrepresented artists gained traction through the civil rights movement and the feminist movement. With little representation in art history other than African art and Mexican muralists, many Black artists developed their own visual language and established their own rules to fill this void. Printmaking workshops, including the famous Robert Blackburn Workshop in New York City and the Brandywine Workshop and Archives in Philadelphia, played an important role by providing the opportunity for artists to learn, experiment, and exchange ideas. The collegial and open atmosphere of workshops like these also introduced internationally known artists to the community and made art accessible. In 1972, Allan L. Edmonds founded the Brandywine Workshop and Archives to promote collaboration, cultural diversity, and inclusion through art and outreach programs. This community-driven organization engages urban youth through printmaking and public art projects, produces nationally traveling exhibitions, and collaborates with internationally recognized artists, many of whom are also represented on view in this exhibition. After nearly 50 years, Brandywine continues to expand its educational mission into the digital age with the Virtual Institute for Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity in Education and the Arts, which includes Artura.org, the world's first free online database of contemporary diverse artists. Inspired by this, our own exhibition incorporates QR codes with each artwork throughout this gallery that link to that database, Artura.org, and also to extended artist biographies and even video interviews. Now, the next slide shows the 7 special works that are from Brandywine, although of the 22 artists, almost all of them have been touched by Brandywine in this exhibition as a Lifetime Achievement Award nominees or just having printed there, but these are the 7 that represent directly from Brandywine. So I'll go just quickly from the top left to the right. We have Elizabeth Catlett, The Blues, Allan Edmonds, 200 Years, Mo Brooker, And Then You Laugh, Wadsworth Jarrell, Tender Souls, Paul Keene, 3 Brothers, Howardina Pindell, Katrina, and Barbara Chase Roubeau, Akhmatov's Monument. Joining us this evening are our esteemed guests, Allan Edmonds, founder of the Brandywine Print Workshop and Archives in Philadelphia, and with me here in the gallery is printmaker Marjorie Greene-Graff. Now, I was pretty excited to find out when this conversation started so many months ago when we were working on this exhibition that these 2 individuals share a lot in common as educators and printmakers. Both are from Philadelphia, and I think they were actually born the same year.
Yes.
And they both majored at printmaking or in printmaking at the Tyler School of Art at Temple University around the same time. So it's a wonder how they didn't know each other before this. As an educator for 40 years, Marjorie Greene-Graff was the professor of printmaking here at St. Petersburg College for 21 years. And most recently, she is a founding member of the 24 Hands Printmakers Group. We recently had a retrospective of her reduction woodblock relief prints in 2018. Allan Edmonds is an artist and educator, master printmaker, mentor, advocate, and innovator dedicated to the advancement of multiculturalism in the arts. In addition to establishing Brandywine, he is the interim director of the Virtual Institute for Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity in Education and the Arts. And his deep commitment to education has garnered many accolades as he continues to forge a path for artists of color into the 21st century. Allan's work is collected by the Smithsonian, Philadelphia Museum of Art, Harvard University Museums, and so many others. Featured in this exhibition, his offset lithograph 200 Years was printed by the Brandywine Workshop to celebrate the historic election of President Barack Obama in 2008, and it happens to be prominently displayed over our shoulders. So without further ado, I'd love to welcome Marjorie and Allan. Yeah. So we have, here, I'm just going to make my screen big so we can see everybody. Now, welcome to Allan. I know he's got a lot to talk about, and we're so excited to have him, but I definitely wanted to start off with this personal connection. We were so excited that Marjorie actually got to go to Philadelphia, to her hometown, and visit with Allan and see his studio in person, and came back with many stories. And I think Allan made a new best friend out of Marjorie's husband as well.
Definitely, yes. Yeah, I get a feeling, Allan, everybody is your new best friend.
Well, it was a pleasure meeting your husband. He's a great gentleman.
Thank you. I will convey that. I feel very honored and a little humbled to be included in this. But as Christine said, we have a parallel life. For the first 30 some years of my life, I grew up in Philadelphia, went to Philadelphia College of Art, now the University of the Arts, and then to Tyler for graduate school, where I studied with Romas Vieselis, who was Allan's teacher. But following that, or maybe some of it overlapped, I worked in a program called Prints in Progress, which I understand Allan's wife ran. I didn't know that at the time, but we went out into the public schools and demonstrated silkscreen to the students. And then I did a little bit of work with the Fabric Workshop, which was started by Kippy Stroud, who Allan, of course, knew. And there was just so much overlapping. I worked for 2 years at the Print Club on Latimer Street, but I didn't get to know Allan, and I did not know about Brandywine. So when Christine brought this up, I was thrilled. And I got the opportunity in June to go and see this amazing space. And everything that has been said is just an understatement of the quality of the work, the commitment of the artists and the printers who work there. And I'm just thrilled that we're able to, here in Tarpon Springs, Florida, to promote the wonderful work that Brandywine is doing.
Well, I think, I don't know about you guys, and because I went to art school in Baltimore, I have an affinity for Philadelphia, but I know that I'm very curious to get the perspective of the late 60s, early 70s, and the scene, that what was happening in Philly at the time. But perhaps maybe Allan would love to talk about how you got started and where this idea came from to establish this workshop.
Actually got started overseas in Italy. In 1969, I did Tyler has a study abroad program junior year. And you could spend a year in Rome studying. Marjorie had mentioned that Romas Vieselis was both our mentors and teachers in printmaking. I had Romas in the foundation course of my junior year in 68. And then just so happened that he went to Rome for a 3-year stint the same year that I was going there. So I had a chance to study with him for 2 years. So he's the one that really got me thinking about printmaking. I always wanted to be a teacher. So I was, working towards certification courses. But as far as a primary medium, printmaking, I just fell in love with it. And Vieselis taught me a lot, but he mentored me. He looked at me and he encouraged me. And one of the things that I've always tried to commit to, because I feel it's one of the key roles that an educator plays, is to be a mentor, to be a good role model. And so one of the things that's carried me through on my journey is that I've always had that mentor, that role model, that person I could rely upon to show me what quality looked like, what planning involved, and so forth. So when I was in Rome, I was committed to being the, master printmaker. But in the studio with me was Sister Karen Bacalero. And I never forget, one night we were in the studio late and just talking about what we wanted to do after graduation. And she said she wanted to start a print workshop when she finished. And she was a nun from Los Angeles, and she wanted to work in the East Los Angeles community that would be her mission, to bring art and culture to that community, to help uplift that community and give the kids something to do. That aligned closely with what I wanted to do, you know. When I came back and then graduated, Marjorie mentioned the print club. I had an opportunity to show in an international screen printing show, because I was pretty good at that. It was the time when people were starting to do photo screen prints. And my work was hanging next to Robert Rauschenberg at a major international exhibition at Philadelphia Museum of Art. Here I was 20, 21, 22 years old. And for me, that was it. That was my 15 minutes of fame. And I said, what am I going to do with this opportunity? Because of course, I got introduced to collectors, museum staff, curators, went to dinner and so forth and so on. And I just felt that from my experience and what I could see around me, particularly with the literature and the curriculum never teaching about African-American artists, that I was going to be a momentary, success. So what do I do with those moments, that moment that I was in? And that's when I really said, I'm going to use this to start a workshop. And the other thing that drove my interest in starting a workshop was I met the director. I was actually on staff at Prints in Progress, as previously described, as community outreach program for the Venerable Print Club, which is now well over 100 years old, maybe the oldest print organization in the country. And I was on staff. The director left, an assistant director took over. Her name was Ann Pitts. And she was, I was drawn to her. She was very pretty and young and vibrant. And I was not looking to get hooked up, but man, she was in the field, but she was my boss. So after working for her for a couple months, they decided that the print club hadn't really budgeted the expansion program that the previous director was responsible for. So they had to cut some of their costs. And she actually had to see, I wouldn't say fire. When you eliminate a program, the people go. You're not necessarily fired, the people go, right? So I fell in love with her. She fell in love with me. She fired me. So that's the way we started out, right? So, but it was really important to my path because, as I was saying before this, is that you can have a vision and you can work and sacrifice and do everything to pursue that vision, but you don't want to give up on life, basic things in life, like love and family, and things that make you the whole person. So in the fall of 2022, Brandywine celebrates its 50th anniversary. Brandywine was opened up less than a month after we got married. So we celebrate our 50th anniversary, So it's like a lot of people separate art and what they do. Musicians are the worst, from life. And the other part of life usually is not, it doesn't replenish you, it doesn't stabilize you. And you go through all these marriages and all these problems and stuff. So I've been blessed. How do you start out with nothing in 1972? I mean, literally, I had a station wagon. We were driving around on trash day, picking up tables and chairs and whatever we could get, going to the paper houses and getting throwaway paper to print on. And then after a couple years, we put together a board of directors and we got tax exemption. And I think our first grant was 1975 for $2,000 from the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts. We gave every dime to Romare Bearden to come and give a lecture at the Philadelphia Museum of Art and to receive our first Lifetime Achievement Award, because we wanted to start at the highest level we could. And undoubtedly, Bearden was the most venerated African-American artist of the time. And that was facilitated because one of the board members was Paul Keene, who had met him in Paris. So a lot of things kind of had seed in Europe. And just to go back with the history, after the Second World War, people took advantage of the GI Bill to travel overseas, buy homes, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of artists, Black artists from that generation after WPA and the Works Progress, they went to Europe under the GI Bill and they met people, you know. So that was really stimulating and encouraging to them, because then they were in contact with, quote, maybe the avant-garde of the time, you know. They experienced it the same way I experienced Italy and traveling through Europe and North Africa by myself to really experience what the wider world was about. So Brandywine's mission was to be culturally diverse, be as broad as we could, because if you do something good, it can be replicated or it can be embraced in a universal kind of way. So it wasn't about, even though the entire board was African-American, it was never just about African-Americans. Like, you know, we say Black, it assumes, connotes a certain kind of, in my mind, a marginalization, because we're not Black, we're not white, we all come from somewhere. And we should acknowledge and put out our heritage because that's part of who we are. So when we say the diaspora, we're talking about, we're getting ready to do a show now, the Afro-Latinx influence in the art, you know, which has been denied by a lot of Latin American, Central American countries. But we know that the Caribbean, we know that Africa now, a lot of Africans go to Europe and get educated and start their careers there, or they, you know, come over here as students and stay. So the world is global in a way that, you know, only technology and communications and global effects, such as economics, we begin to understand how the world has always been global. And art is always the first sign, the first indication you can point to and say, this is global. I mean, the contributions of Japanese woodcut, the contributions of Arabic nations to mathematics and science and stuff. So I could go on and on and on, but it's not simplistic, you know. It's not complicated either. It's about being able to make and see how transparent these connections are if we want to look at it, you know. And I have a board member that says, you know, art will save humanity. If you think about it, it is one of the most powerful tools we have. You know, we need to weaponize art and culture. You know, I think Clinton administration did a very good job of that, because he really funded the State Department in their cultural exchange programs and so forth. And we during his administration, we probably had exhibitions going to 30-some different cities and countries around the world. So that may be a long introduction, but I warned Christine and Marjorie that it gets like that when you're 50 years in. You know?
That's no, we appreciate that, and I mean, we're both just like, tell me more. we could go on and on, but we do. I mean, you know, the early seeds of something that has now survived 50 years, just about, which is, you know, 3/4 of a lifetime. I mean, it's amazing how you've grown this into something that's it's astounding, and I want more people to know about it. And some of those, I know early on you probably had a lot of faced a lot of challenges, I'm sure, you know, with money and stuff like that. But I know Marjorie and I are both really curious about that gigantic offset litho press that we saw in the slideshow of when. So I know you started out with screen printing, and then you had the opportunity to get this sort of semi-truck sized press and switched to offset lithography, correct?
Yes, let me try to give you a short answer to that. We started out with screen printing because that was my expertise. I was known in Philadelphia I was on the cutting edge of photo screen printing. And it was cheap. You didn't need a whole lot of expensive equipment. You could make all your equipment. We moved from there in 1980. John Dow, who's a master printer, he's in fact the second person to receive the Master Printer Certificate from Tamarin, and the first African-American back in, I think, 1963. And we started experimenting with commercial offset litho presses. The reason was that silkscreen was hard when you got into the details and the fine night, and you couldn't do graded tones, you know, that required multiple printings. So if we use Mylars, we had the artist draw on a Mylar, and we could expose that to aluminum plate, put that up on a cylinder press and run it. We could run, we could be more efficient at what we were printing, holding the color, keeping registration, and we could produce the prints quicker, because now we weren't primarily dealing with a labor-intensive kind of hand process. The press could do that work, and it opened up, it improved our efficiency, but it also opened up collages and printing tile prints where you print 4 images and put them together to create one. We could innovate, experiment a little bit more, but it was much more efficient. The catch was we had to go to the commercial industry to find a master printer or press operator. And so we started, the first press in '83, and then the flatbed that you saw in the pictures is one of the few that are left in the country. There's maybe 12 of them in the country. We obtained that because a printer in Lower Manhattan, they were converting his building to lofts, and he had to move, and he said, "I'm too old, I can't move. If you want the press, you can have it." So in 2005, we brought that press down to Philadelphia and installed it. And it kind of took us back to more traditional, whereas in the past, we had these cylinder presses that were churning out prints like, you know, press the button and you got 100 copies of that color, to something that was still mechanical, but you printed it one at a time. You could lift it off. And it really aligned with what was happening in printmaking, because while we started out doing editions of 100 in the 80s and the 90s, it was slowing down. Artists didn't necessarily want, and we didn't necessarily need half that edition. The way we do it, the artist gets half, we keep half. And so you got 50 copies. It was great if the artist was selling well, they got 50 pieces to sell. But if they weren't, they just kind of might lay in storage somewhere. So, and then there's more value, as you know, to the smaller the edition. So the shift to the flatbed, you know, aligned with the need to cut down on edition size, which we have. So
well, and that, I guess with that, you have a massive archive that you've developed, which, you know, as I mentioned, we now you also have the online database, which I know was a labor of love for you for many years, developing that. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you developed that archive and you brought in all of these different artists and what you do with that archive? I know you travel exhibitions that have been supported by the Smithsonian and whatnot.
Well, because I came up in an era where there was no documentation in the literature and nobody was talking about these artists, not just Black artists, Asian American, Latin American, Native American. It wasn't in the books, it wasn't in the study. So I've always been committed to documentation. So, excuse me. So when the artist comes, we photograph them, we photograph the work, we try to get their statement on what the artwork is about. Every time we have an exhibition in the gallery, we try to do a catalog, no matter how modest, we document it. And when digital came into being, you had to switch. You know, we've got tons of color slides from when artists applied, approved, or some rejected. And we curate through those color slides. That's a major task ahead of us, is to digitize probably the first 30 years of visiting artists' slides. But the artwork itself, which is about 1,400 individual images, is one aspect of the collection. There's another aspect. Because we've always been in a planning mode, we do a 5-year plan and that's what we work with. We have been so much more advanced, and I have to use this word, than other workshops who struggle hand to mouth, so forth and so on. You know, Brandywine, because it's planning and because of its breadth of programming, has been able to attract some funding. It's still a struggle, but you take what funds you have and you apply it towards your priorities. And the priority has always been produce the best work you can and document that you did it. So if the organization is erased for one reason or another, the legacy cannot be erased. And that's one of the things that the internet and the cloud allow us to do. So we planned for 12 years to launch a database online that would be free. Last year, due to the pandemic and the rush to get things online and people to find resources online, we launched our tour database. It's still a work in progress. We have many images to upload from the Visiting Artist Program. But because of all these things that we've done with documentation and sharing out over the internet, you know, we are now taking upon ourselves to try to save and preserve some of these collections that might otherwise disappear. You showed images of Bob Blackburn in the beginning. Bob, of course, was a dear friend, and he inspired me for everything that he did. But he made me realize how, you know, his 50-some years, you know, was in jeopardy. What he had created, what he had done in 51 years was in jeopardy when he died. It still exists, but it doesn't exist as, let's say, the way that Brandywine does, where you can actually access it. So in his will, Bob understood that and gave Brandywine a number of prints. We have almost 200 prints by Bob Blackburn, Printmaking Workshop. And this represents artists across the spectrum. And it's intergenerational. We have prints before Sister Karen Bacalero died several years ago. We had exchanged prints with her. So we have prints that we sent to Self-Help Graphics in Los Angeles. They sent prints to us. We did a 4-year exchange in Havana, Cuba, with the Experimental Print Workshop there. We brought artists in residence. We took exhibitions there, brought exhibitions back. This again was done during the Clinton administration, although we privately funded it. The openness that administration gave to foreign exchange was tremendous. So we have a collection from the Experimental Print Workshop in Havana, Cuba. We have collages, we have prints, we have some of the most major artists like Belkis Aoun, Choco, Eduardo Rocco, and they have a collection at the Contemporary Wilfredo Lamb Contemporary Art Center there. We have, we're in a relationship now with the Sam Coronado Print Studio in Austin, Texas, not to necessarily, you know, acquire their collection, but to access their image library and put that up on the website to be shared. Sam died about 5-6 years ago, and, you know, they really have not had the capacity to do that. We're talking to the Asian American Art Center in New York, which has stopped operations a few years ago, but the database still exists. And we're in negotiation with their founder to bring that database on board to the Artura platform. So there's a lot of things that we want to do that touches on the visiting artist collection, the permanent collection, which is not only the organizations that have given us work, but the individual artists also have given us work. I mean, we have a large body of prints by Sam Gilliam, John Dow, Keith Morrison. It's a very rich and very diverse database. I should say, this is the time to say, in conjunction with that though, one of the things that we did since the 80s was to create satellite collections of Brandywine prints. Because if you're talking about documentation and sharing, back then there was no internet, no digital tools. And we physically wanted these collections to be available, used for education, be seen, exhibited. And so we targeted heritage center, ethnic heritage centers and HBCUs, historically Black colleges, and we gave them work. We gave it to the Library of Congress, to the Philadelphia Free Library, and institutions that didn't have a big budget, but also were not diverse. So to help them create some kind of diversity in their collections, we did that. As time went on, we drew the attention of major art museums and universities who then did a gift purchase. Now we're into, in some situations, a purchase program. So all of this is about documentation. And if you started 50 years ago and you kept doing it, you should have a fairly deep, resource of materials to share online.
Well, and
I'm sorry for being so long, but see, you get me started, and the whole thing is like one thing doesn't exist in isolation of other things. They're all connected.
Especially in printmaking. I mean, that just kind of hit me over the head as you were speaking about how far-reaching. I don't think any other medium in the art world that is so community driven in a way and exchangeable, that just filters through everything. And I mean, this gift from Jim Sweeny has hugely increased our diversity in our collection. And it's been our mission for years. But as a small museum, and we don't have an acquisition fund, we rely on donations and trying to fill in gaps when we can. But this is a very, very significant turn for us to have these prints, and especially to be able to represent your workshop with so many artists that have been touched personally by you. So kudos to you for all that you've built over the past 50 years. I mean, I don't want to say that number too many times, because I know it's a big number to think about. But that's amazing. It looks like we might have time for another question, and then we'll open it up to the chat and Q&A. Marjorie, is there anything in particular that you wanted to ask?
Well, I asked at the time, and it's almost like picking your favorite child if you have many. But from your perspective, who were the artists that really impacted you as you worked with them? And it may have been their imagery or their work style or their commitment, but who stood out as, a real hero to you?
Well, first and foremost, it has to be Romas Vieslas. And you got to give me a minute to make this connection. I did not know until we did an exhibition celebrating his 100th anniversary. He was born at the time Lithuania got its independence. In 1917, got its first independence. In 2017, or maybe it was 2018, we did an exhibition coordinated with his family. That's when I learned that Romas's history was, he was to be a politician. He had some kind of status in Lithuania. When the Russians came in after the Second World War, he had to flee. He fled to Munich. He gets to Munich, or maybe it was another city. I may get this wrong, but he fled to Germany, and he had meningitis. He's in the hospital, and he was sketching or something. The doctor said, son, you got a chance to be an artist. Why don't you think about being an artist? He goes to a French-sponsored school in Germany, the school in Paris in Germany. This is right after the Second War, all that devastation and loss of life, and France set up, again, culture can save the world. The fact that he attended a Paris art school in Germany, he did so well, he decided he was going to come to the United States, and he had an opportunity to go to Chicago and paint some murals, because Chicago has the largest Lithuanian population in the United States. Philadelphia has the second. So he goes to Lithuania, he paints the murals. There's no more work and it's cold. He says, I might as well go to New York. Let me try New York. He goes to New York. He doesn't get any traction. His English is not that good. He's walking the streets and he bumps into somebody and says, can you help me? I need some direction. And family told me he was suicidal at that point. And somebody pointed him to Bob Blackburn's printmaking workshop. He goes to Bob Blackburn's printmaking workshop, settles in there, and then they get a call. The workshop gets a call from Philadelphia, Tyler School of Art, saying they have a professor that's taken a year's leave. They need a replacement for 1 year. He goes, he says, I can't speak English. He said, don't worry, you're teaching art, you're not teaching English. He goes to Philadelphia, joins the faculty of Tyler, retires from there after about 25 years, becomes the most distinguished faculty at Tyler. In fact, he was the only printmaker ever given the honor of being the artist in residence for the United States at the Venice Biennale. He invites his top student, John Dow, who I mentioned earlier, to be a printer in the studio. So now that, and you imagine how to impact John. John is like me. I'm from West Philly, he's from North Philly. We grew up in a predominantly Black neighborhood and didn't think about Paris and Rome or any of these other things growing up, let alone be there in an art capacity. So the story is, I'm connected to Bob for decades before I knew that the person that got me started thinking about printmaking as a career was Romas Fiestas and the role that Bob had. Whether Bob talked to him direct or not, he provided the workshop, a gathering place, a meeting place to build community among artists that were struggling. So one thing that the Works Project Administration offered that wasn't available in the general population was a place where you could go to an integrated setting of professionals. Bob did the same thing. Not only was it integrated, but it was multinational because it was New York. So I have to say that because again, I think, Marjorie, Christine, now everybody, you gotta look at art as not just an object on a wall in a frame or something that has so much value it sells at auction. Yes, you can collect art for wealth generation if you have the money, but art is about humanity, and it comes out of people's experience, whatever that is, and their contact with other people, how it connects. So my success, Christine, if I think there's been success, and I will admit that I'm very proud of where we're at almost a day, 50 years, is because people saw beyond race, saw beyond ethnicity, background. They just saw creativity and making something and striving to do something collectively, So, and that's building community where you don't see it in life normally. So I could go on, but I need to stop. But I just had to make that connection because here Viesa is one of the greatest. He's the only artist printmaker to receive the pavilion, excuse me, at the Venice Biennale, and there's never been another one.
That's amazing. And it just when you start to think about all of the 6 degrees of separation and full circle time and time again, it's impressive. That's I can't even imagine. I guess I don't know if we want to open it up to questions and answers from the visitors on here. I also know that we had talked about the 200 years print that's behind us and a little bit of background on that. But if anybody has any questions, and if they don't, certainly learning a little bit more about this print would be great. Teresa, have we gotten anything in the chat?
Yeah, we do have a couple questions in the chat. And this one goes out to both you, Marjorie and Allan. As artists, when you're working through problems in your work, who do you talk to?
You talk to your head.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just have to, I think I talk to the work and just listen to it, which could take a long time till it answers. But if I zoom in on the work and just listen, I will find what it needs. That's been my experience.
I focus on the audience. Who is going to look at it? What do I hope they'll receive from looking at it, So, but it's definitely in your head, That's what I'm always focused on the audience. My art has to function, and articulate some of the things that I would say if I was there, So I work in a lot of series, I love abstract art. I love Marjorie's work from what I've seen, but personally, I call it my situation imperative, to be in the position that I am in, to have seen what I've seen, I need to communicate some of that and give positivity, information, good or bad, but ultimately some connection.
That's it's so true. I saw Linda Berghoff might have a question, and I want to just say briefly, we don't see her on here, but we have audio, but Linda Berghoff, who is another professor of our college, and is a background as a printmaker, and has her family was part of Berghoff and Cowden Editions, which was local here, but we have a great collection, and she worked closely with Sam Gilliam and Miriam Shapiro. So I wish she was sitting here with us, but does Linda have a question in the chat?
And I think she's also a Tyler graduate.
Yeah, she's a Tyler.
Wow.
So did Linda submit a question, or is she on audio?
Linda did not submit a question. I think she wanted to say something. Linda, are you there?
No.
Okay, well, we do have another question in the chat. The question is creating a story in printmaking any different than any other medium?
Good question.
I think you're prejudiced, don't you? It's
well, see, now
medium
that question introduces another thing that forms part of Brandywine's history. Because we were marginalized, there weren't galleries and that kind of thing that showed the work. We had to build an audience, and we had to build a collector group. So the idea of the printmaking is it's a democratic medium, okay? It doesn't have to be expensive because it's multiple. So that opens you up to introducing people to art collecting, real, fine art, not reproductions. Yes, it's so different than a unique item, a unique artwork, okay? It's out there in the public. I mean, Bearden for one, and Sam Gilliam too. I've worked with Sam a lot. We've been working closely for the last 3 years on some projects. The artists that have a sensibility about their place in the community or in their racial community or ethnic community will often donate work or create work to advance a cause. Bearden did a lot of posters and donated a lot of work to auctions, special events. Benny Andrews, another one. Sam Gilliam has done it. And I've done it, I think, a fair number of times. So it's a different medium, and we call it the democratic medium because there's so much you can do with it, So I hope that answers the question.
Well, it's certainly art for the people more than anything. When you look back in art history, and it was a way to spread messages by having multiples that you could spread throughout the land, I guess, if you think about the Renaissance and beyond that. But certainly also, I think there's something about the process of printmaking and the struggle that you go through in that process is as much about the end result as anything else.
Well, Linda did say hi to John Dow. Linda, I stood with John Dow as his best man about a year ago for his fourth wife. and he's very happily married at 80 years old. He's doing a lot of things. He's making prints. He's making them on the computer, digital prints. And he's preparing for a major performance piece. We have a great video on him and his cotton project on our YouTube channel. You should check it out. Yeah, John is very close, so, and I understand you printed for Sam. They're all great people. And they've been a real force and a solid foundation for Brandywine, given the expertise and the understanding and just, being great seniors to all of us at Brandywine.
I guess, are we still not able to get audio from Linda, or, she says, he was responsible for
Rome as a graduate student, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, we caught him back. We caught him when he came back from Rome, Linda, and stayed on the faculty. And then he retired about maybe 5 years ago, after 40 some years. Yeah.
Wow.
So.
Well, do we have any other questions? Because I could go on all night with other questions. I guess, with that, certainly, Allan, we'd love for you to describe your process on this 200 years print, which I think is so poignant for right now. And we were talking earlier about the Barack Obama documentary that's been on constantly in my house, but would love to know more about your process with this print that's behind us.
Well, when he was elected president in the fall, what's that, 2008, everybody started creating portraits of him to memorialize the moment. And I looked at it and I said, well, he's not about himself. It's about the people whose shoulders he stood on to reach that point, the people that, sacrificed and protested for voting rights and everything in the history of Black people. So the slave ship is in there to document slavery. But in order to get the Constitution agreed to by the colonies, the Southern colonies, they had to give up something, Northern colonies to give us something. And what they gave up was a 20-year hold on something that should have been the original Constitution of 1788. 20 years later, in 1808, the Slave Act was enacted, which merely said that if you put slave cargo on a ship and brought it from Africa to the United States, it was illegal. You could, though, take it to Cuba, change the manifest, and then bring it to the United States, right? That's why they did the movie Amistad, about the ship that was, captured by the slaves, and they took it up to New England and they were tried. But they had to prove that they were not originally from Havana, Cuba. They came direct from Africa. So that was very important to me because it's like, it's the first recognition that we exist here. Real recognition. That was 2008. And then 200 years later, 1808, 200 years later in 2008, Obama gets elected president. In the middle of that journey, which, you have a hierarchy, the slave ship, Martin Luther King, the Voting Rights Act under the Johnson administration, and then up to Obama at the top. But if you read closely, Obama was a scholar. He had written books. He was brilliant academically. He went to the best schools. He was worldly. He knew finance when the crash happened in 2008. He had worked on Wall Street with an internship when he was in college on those, I can't remember the instrument that really, brought everything down, strips or whatever it was called. But he knew about that because he had worked on Wall Street in finance. So all the people that I could think of that he embodied, I wrote their names in there. Okay.
Oh, wow.
So you can look and you can now Google those names and see what they did. So he's at the top, but all this movement, evolution happened because there were people that risked their lives or gave their all to make progress. And that's what we were representing. Not his victory, but the victory of 200 years of struggle. And that's why it is what it is.
Well, it's a stunning print, and it really, I think that's the quintessential print for this exhibition too, which, when you think about the history of the Great Migration and then the Harlem Renaissance and all of the artists in between that we're surrounded by in here who have impacted so many other people, just like you have. And in Obama's career, so has he, but every single person in here has gone on to teach and influence and mentor younger generations. And that brings me to my last question is, what do you see as the future for Brandywine when it turns 50 and beyond?
Well, it will have a new leader. I'll retire at 50, finally. We call it Brandywine 2.0. So it'll be whatever that board determines it to be in the leadership, but we hope that they don't destroy the foundation. We think the foundation is solid and they need to build on that foundation, not reconstruct what's already built. That's my primary concern, that the legacy, which is the artwork and the stories of the artists and how they all came together at Brandywine, can be preserved by continued expansion and improvement of the Artur database. The way things are going now with creativity and the tools that people use, traditional printmaking is being marginalized, to say the least. You got so many people that want to run to you, and you can get really good digital prints made on great paper. And so it's a competition, as some of the curators confessed to me, between where the direction of printmaking is going to go. What we try to do at Brandywine, what I hope they will do in the future, is keep pushing printmaking, not as a standard flat printed sheet of paper, but the process that affords innovation and creative possibilities beyond what people realize. So you have people like Sam Gilliam, who's making woodcut monoprints, or we're working with paper making. Dietrich Brackens, who's a weaver from Los Angeles, working with colorized pulp paper, and just a lot of things. We're interested right now in getting more experimental things happening in the print shops. So I hope that continues, because I think that's where the future is going to lie. How we merge the process with creativity in general, be it sculpture, etched metal for sculpture, or whatever it is. I think that's the hope, because I really don't know. I mean, a lot of art schools are dismantling their printmaking studios and going to digital labs. So.
Yeah, well, let's hopefully, I think you're absolutely right, though, being able to incorporate those processes into so many other avenues I think will attract the non-traditional printmaker into that medium and turn them on to something new that's actually very old, but to incorporate that will help it live on, and especially as we get into the digital age. And
printmaking of all the medium has always more easily embraced new technologies.
Yeah.
From the printing press historically to today, with the types of paper, the chemicals, the types of inks, the type of CNC cutter, computer numeric cutters, so the plates. There's so many processes in chemistry that is going on in printmaking today that who knows where it can go. But I do believe that if you can find a way to merge and show people how printmaking has a usefulness for the painters, the sculptors, the weavers, the ceramicists, you know, then you keep it going. But the mere production of an image again and again and again, editioning an image, I don't know what the future holds for that. And I think Brandywine has to stay flexible and resilient to respond to where it goes. Ultimately, for me, as I walk out the door, I would hope that the Artura database, if nothing continues for the next 50 years, that will be primary on the agenda for Brandywine. That's my hope.
Well, I think it's a very good point, because I can tell you in the time that I discovered that database, I think a year ago, it had just launched as I was doing research for this exhibition, and how much it's grown in just the time that I keep coming back to it, I think, and you know, tell me if I'm wrong, but I feel like every time I go on there, there's more stuff to.
It's organic. It's an ongoing process, and we just need more interns and staff to keep it going. You know, it's a massive thing. I mean, I've known universities using the same software. They took a year and 17 staff people to just upload what they had. Major university, you know. So we don't have those kinds of resources to commit that kind of staffing and money to it, but we're working on it. We're trying to, you know, through our partnerships with universities and stuff like that, their co-op programs, their interns, but you still got to have core staff, and that's what we're fundraising for now.
Well, we're very supportive of everything that you're doing, and again, it's just been an absolute pleasure just to chat with you and to get a little behind the scenes look at what you do and where you've come from and where you're going. And hopefully you'll get to go on a vacation once the 50 years comes. But
with COVID, who knows, right?
Yeah. But I guess it's now 6:32, so we should probably wrap up our program. I do want to let you all know that this program has been recorded and you can revisit it. It will be posted to the museum's YouTube channel on our website, and feel free to go back and revisit and share. And I want to take this opportunity to thank Teresa, our director, for everything that she does, and to our small but mighty staff here at the museum. And a special thank you to Marjorie and of course, Allan, for your time and your passion. And I can tell we've made friends for life with you. So we look forward to talking to you again really soon. And thank you all for all of your time this evening. And please come to see the exhibition before it ends, which would be August 29th is the last day for this exhibition. And then hopefully we can take a cue from Allan and get this as a virtual experience in the future, so that it is archived and maybe somehow we get to join the Artura database in some way as a relational aspect. But thank you all so much for your time, and you all stay safe and be well.
Take care. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to share.